I guess the traditional walking into the pub and seeing your friend, and as guys do, patting each other on the back and shaking hands and saying, how are you? It's good to see you. What's been up with you? How have you found things? When is that conversation ever going to happen?
Welcome back to All in Business, your weekly business show here on Joe, backed by AIB. Well, if you've been paying attention over the last few weeks, you'll have noticed we've been looking at businesses uniquely affected by the COVID crisis. Last week we were talking about food. This week we're looking at the drinks industry. How have publicans, distillers and brewers been affected by the crisis, and what happens when we get back to life as normal? Well, here to discuss, we're joined by fourth generation publican Deirdre Devitt and by Teelings Whiskey founder Jack Teeling. Later on, our trailblazer will be the co-founder of Carlow Brewing Company, Seamus O'Hara. Now, before all that, don't forget to hit subscribe to get the full show each week on podcast and YouTube so that you never miss an episode. Right, let's get started.
Joe presents All In, together with AIB, backing Irish business.
Jack and Deirdre, thanks so much for being with us this morning. These aren't easy times for anybody at the moment, but for publicans and brewers and distillers with doors closed at the moment, I can't imagine this is easy for any of you. It being Ireland and it being our culture, the pub is very much at the heart of that, and there's no way around it. So in terms of yourselves, in terms of owners, in terms of staff, it's obviously a very difficult time, but for ordinary people, in terms of their social outlet, that's gone too. I'd imagine that's very, very difficult for people, for rural people in rural areas. And Deirdre, I wanted to ask you, especially because obviously you work with the charity Alone, for older people who maybe that was their main social outlet. This just must be devastating altogether.
It is. I mean, Alone have probably made over 40,000 calls in the last 6 weeks back out to people, as well as taking nearly 20,000 calls in. People are really missing the face-to-face, even if they're living rurally and they were used to a little bit of traffic going past the door or a neighbour walking down the road. It's very evident now that people are really struggling. I mean, we're one of the most social countries in the world, and this is probably the most antisocial virus we've ever come across. It's hard to understand, I suppose, where we go. When you see people walking into a pub, older people in particular, it's probably for their half portion at lunchtime. That's their only outing for the day. That's when they have their meal. That's when they like to engage in conversation with the waitress or whomever they meet on the way to the pub, especially in suburban areas or in cities around the country. So, people are really, really feeling the loss of the face-to-face. We have an initiative with Vodafone. We're sending out phones, for example, to people to keep them connected, and that's helpful. But it's just not the same. And I think, our own parents included, it's hard to accept that you can't see grandkids, and it's hard to accept that you can't just do your norm, especially if you feel fit and well, and that walking or going out is part of your daily routine to keep your physical and mental health in check. So it's very difficult at the moment. We can just reassure people. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns out there. My comment about scaremongering is we've adapted very well day by day, hour by hour, week by week. If we keep that approach, things are happening and changing very quickly. I just feel, making long-term statements are just not helpful. But if we keep adapting week by week, we might get there. But I mean, we have to understand, it worries me, it worries everybody, the mental health of the whole country is under scrutiny here. And if we don't offer hope, then what do we offer? I mean, I'm a very positive person, but everybody's struggling, and we're talking to older people 12 hours a day, reassuring them and comforting them and offering them a social outlet on the phone that we can call them back and have the chats, basically. But it's not just older people that are feeling that, younger people, kids in school, small kids. So yeah, it's a tough situation, no doubt.
And of course, it's not just pubs being affected in terms of doors closed. Jack, your visitor centre, for example, with the distillery will be closed as well. I'm wondering for both of you, what will a reopening look like for either of you? Or actually, probably, a better place to start is let's go backwards before we go forwards to reopenings. You both would have closed your doors the week before St. Patrick's Day, the busiest time of the year busiest time of the year, for both of you. I'd imagine the effect you're still dealing with the ramifications of that.
12th of March, our world was turning its head when the Taoiseach came out in Washington DC and basically told us that tourist attractions had to close. So we closed our visitor centre and our offices on that day. But it also put a stop to a lot of initiatives that we were doing around the world, using St. Patrick's Day as a great shop window to talk about all things Irish, and particularly, premium Irish whiskey. I was just literally a couple of weeks ago, went back into the distillery, and it was like the world had just stopped. Everything was just there, our badges for St. Patrick's Day and everything. It was like a time capsule of a time of yesteryears. We've been struggling to get our head around what to do since then. And I really feel for hospitality in general, but also the tourism side of business, because that's just gone. And, no one could plan for this. And while there is government supports in place to keep people on people's books and so forth, but there's no real long-term strategy for the knock-on implications, which will happen over the foreseeable future. The third season's over, so no one's going to come. 2020 is gone. So okay, we have a 12-week support for salaries, which are no doubt going to be slowly pulled back. But what's going to happen for the rest of the business? And we're all talking about all these debt facilities being set up. So you're dumping all this debt on companies with no way to deal with the knock-on effect of that. So look, I think everyone's trying their best to do it, but the solutions that are in place aren't necessarily the right solutions to ensure viable businesses actually can get their way out of it. But for us, we're planning for reopening. I think that's the only thing from our visitor centre, in terms of we have a cafe element, we have a retail element, and we're looking at basic ways that we can open it just to get people working again. And it feels so much more positive to be able to talk about that and plan for that, rather than just looking into this abyss of never opening again and no return to normality. So we're hoping come the 5th of May, there's a roadmap, or a beginning of a roadmap in terms of what we can do to plan for the future.
And in terms of full reopenings, whenever that may be, what do you think that's going to look like from a consumer perspective? Because I guess people are kind of saying this could go either way. There could be a run on the pubs, so to speak, as in, a huge mass congregations of people just desperate to see each other and have a social life again. But it could go the other way either, and people could be quite wary for a long time of being around each other in big gatherings. What do you think consumers are going to want from pubs and breweries and visitor centres in the future?
I think consumer behaviour will take a while to come back. I don't think people will just totally flip on its head. And the longer it goes on, the harder it will be to unwind that. I think just as a human nature, we like to socialise. That will always come back out, but how quickly it will mean to people being very comfortable going to large group gatherings like concerts and so forth, besides from being allowed to happen, I think it'll take some time for that to come back.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I mean, we closed on all pubs closed on the Sunday the 15th. We had been planning to close that afternoon anyway, but we reopened for takeaway on the Thursday, so 2 days after St. Patrick's Day. And I think it's very evident that people, at least through a takeaway menu, people are collecting this contactless pickup, that they're still happy to see people. We find, we're really doing it to get some people back to work, and also to provide a service to the local community, where people are entitled to a treat. It's as if everything went and nobody's entitled to anything except staying at home and looking at the four walls. So, the type of service we're offering now is small enough. It's keeping some people in jobs. We're hoping to ramp it up. I guess the traditional walking into the pub and seeing your friend, and as guys do, patting each other on the back and shaking hands and saying, "How are you? It's good to see you. What's been up with you? How have you found things?" When is that conversation ever going to happen? It's very, very hard to see how people can get back to some semblance of normality and make it viable. We have, for example, a public bar, a lounge, and an outdoor area. Are we looking at not opening the bar? Are we looking at selling tickets? Are you looking at employing security? mean, how do you say no to somebody who probably hasn't been out in 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks? It's a very difficult situation to be in, and we don't want a sterile environment either, because that's what the whole idea of the pub is, the social aspect of it. It's the people watching, it's the nod to who you know, how are you doing? But if you can't get close to them, you can't be in a bar. So it's not a one size fits all. A public bar, a public bar where there's no food served is going to really struggle. Pubs that serve food on a large basis are restaurants essentially, and they should be given the option to open and practice whatever precautions they need to practice to get back up and running. However, operating at 20, 30, 40% of your capacity is not going to be viable. And as Jack said there, debt support, great. No, it's grants. It's we're not looking for loans. How are we going to pay back loans? When are you going to be back up to full capacity? When are people going to be back to work? It's a very different picture, isn't it, on the horizon? But I think, we're not rigid. We're robust, and we are all in this together, and we will find new, novel ways to keep people safe and to open up. But that requires investment too. And when there's no money coming in, how do you do that? So it's a lot of unanswered questions, I suppose. But again, I just think if we keep it week to week, and if government engage with publicans and distillers and people in business and try and understand how together we can get the country back up and running, I think it's very, very important. And we're open to doing that. And if anything has been proven in the last number of weeks and months, it's that we can break the mold and reinvent it, and put new things in place and do that quickly, and we can adapt. And every industry in the country, in the world, has adapted. And I mean, look at retail, look at supermarkets, they've changed and adapted. And that probably won't go back to previous days, the screens and the bit of distancing, that's all going to change. But I think, it's a very different picture on the horizon, but we have to be hopeful. And I think people deserve the opportunity to get back out there and know that they're being protected, and that we have to get the wheels of industry back up and running, though, at some stage.
And reinvention and innovation, I suppose, have probably never, ever been more important. I know you're both taking steps to adapt, and Deirdre, you guys, reopened for food within 2 days. Jack, I think I read somewhere, or perhaps you told me, you're doing virtual tours now of the centre. You've probably both had to get creative with things like even your marketing and advertising. I'm curious to know, how have you put the heads down in terms of trying to think outside the box and come up with just different ways of being?
Yeah, I think the first couple of weeks, people were shocked. We were just in shock. And you're dealing with the new situation. But after that kind of settled down, it was like, okay, well, what can we do? And what are, the levers that we can pull to still stay connected, and also to give back to our local community. So we I suppose the ethos that I took was, how do you want to be remembered after this is all over? So did you do everything you could do to deal with it as best you possibly can? So we've a couple of different strands. Some is a community outreach and community support, based around PPE, care packages for frontline facing staff, in particular customers in off license who are still open, and they're being exposed as anyone else, and they don't have access maybe to some of the other stuff that other people would have. Make hand sanitizers, different things like that. We've done a charity bottling, which created some funds that we could give back to the likes of Alone, or to some of the hospitals that are literally in the epicenter of COVID-19 in Dublin, and other things like that. So we did that, but also from a marketing perspective, you have digital media, and reality is you can use platforms like Zoom and everything else to connect to them, and it's probably something we should have been doing beforehand, but it just forced us to do it. So we've been working with retail partners that would sell a tasting kit, and then on a Wednesday we would do a virtual tasting through the whiskies. We've a virtual tour created that will allow people to go in and just go around the distillery and see it for themselves, and different things like that. So I think these are stuff, again, a company like us should have been doing, because we're trying to be a global business, and people will never get to Dublin and come and see us. So how can we connect to them? And we'll continue to do more of that, and finding ways of enjoying our product in a safe environment, in moderation. Teeling at home, creating cocktails and different like that. So they can have an experience in their own house, but also feel part of a community doing something the same. So that social aspect of it, while you won't see face to face, I think you can create communities where, we can share the same interest and learn about something and feel that element of connection using modern technology. But look, nothing will beat the face-to-face. Nothing will beat talking to people in a bar, in a pub, or a whiskey show. But look, we're just trying our best and doing what we can in the current environment.
And obviously, innovation contributes to robustness, I suppose. But another factor there might be the age and how long a company has been up and running. So Teeling's obviously 5 years old, and Deirdre, you're fourth generation publican. And do you think that puts both of you in a stronger position to ride this out?
I mean, as I said, we're lucky that we have bar, restaurant, outdoor area. We did a lot of outside catering as well. So we've been through many recessions, I suppose, and hopefully we'll weather the storm here. I think the support of people and of customers and of locals in the community we live in has been tremendous. Everybody is saying, we will be back, we will support you, we can't wait for you to open your doors. Everybody's embracing the takeaway food as a treat. So we just have to, I suppose, ride the storm. It's just, look, people have great ideas, and I think if one thing this is demonstrated, that people are working longer hours from home. They're working an average 12-hour day now. But even in Alone, we've seen virtual fundraisers like we've never ever seen before. You've people even last night doing a 5K in Dubai for Alone, marathons, people designing artwork, and there's just been so many novel ideas that have raised funds for Alone that people have thought up because they're so creative. I think we are very creative, and I think as the days and weeks move on, we'll come up with newer ideas, to battle the storm and to come out of this fighting. But also, I guess, in an established community where we're very conscious that there's an older population and that we have lost a lot of neighbours and customers, and we don't want to forget them either. And we've always kind of prided ourselves as being the pub at the hub of the community and supporting active retirement groups, mother and baby groups, and all of that. So I think there'll be a time when we come out of this as well to remember people. And we've only been able to do that digitally till now. So yeah, look, we'll continue to be innovative. We've lots of ideas. It's just about the funds to pay for the innovativeness, I suppose, that we'll have to look into.
I think from our perspective, definitely the fact that we've been in business, actually we started in 2012. The visitor centre has been open since 2015. So we've developed, I suppose, more advanced route to market than a lot of new companies. So I actually really feel for some of the newer entrants in either brewing or in spirit side of things, because most of our outlets now are closed, while we've actually managed to get some national distribution. So we can still buy our products where people can shop, and also in the independent off-license channel. So, and also we're in nearly 70 different export markets. But the difference with that is that normally when there's a recession in one or two countries, there's always some other countries that will carry you. This is global. Everyone's in the same situation. In France, all the outlets that basically stock our product is closed. Same in Germany and so forth. But in fairness, being able to pivot with some of our partners into Amazon and different outlets like that, where there is obviously a lot of people are buying, but the problem is people don't buy something new when in crisis. When you're scared and you're shocked, you don't go out and try a new expensive 60, 70 euro bottle of gin. You buy what you know, and we're finding that people are nearly bulk buying the established brands that they're comfortable with, so they don't have to go out and buy whatever their supply for the next month. So it's helping us, but also in other markets where we're less developed, it's obviously a big challenge as well.
And do you think there'll be a big drive to support local, both premises and products, when this is all over?
I firmly do, and I'm trying my best. I'm definitely trying to support all bars, restaurants, retail outlets that are still trying their best to stay open and offering innovative things. whatever we can, with home barbecue kits. And again, trying to create the experience at home. It's not the same, but it's still, you feel like you're doing something sport. Yeah. And, look, I think the quality of steaks you get from a restaurant are a lot better than you buy in supermarkets. And also it's a bit of a theatre and something nice and new. And I know there's a couple of bars even near where I live who are managing to deliver draft pints and so forth. So look, people are trying their best and people are dying to give back. And again, if we work together, the consumer support is there. We just have to figure a way of operating that's safe, but also viable, commercially viable for bars, restaurants, to tap into that latent interest that's actually there.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous support as well. I'd agree with Jack there. I just think it'll be very disappointing if people want to support and realise that their local coffee shop or their local restaurant or their local pub can't reopen because maybe they were a leaseholder and maybe they're just not, it's not viable. They just can't open their doors again. So I think there has to be the supports there to support hospitality, to support tourism and to get ourselves back up and running. And there have to be breaks there for people. I mean, having a lease on a premises is not easy. And, commercial landlords have a responsibility, so do banks, and suppliers, I think, will be very good as well in that they will support people. But if you're walking down the road locally and your coffee shop is gone and your small, retail shop, is still open but doesn't offer the coffee, and then you see the restaurant doesn't open and the pub it doesn't open. I'm out and about working at the moment, and it's tragic to see all the closed premises across the city. So I can't imagine what it's like outside of main cities. I'd imagine it's pretty bleak. So I think local support is there, but the financial supports have to be there to allow people to reopen and to get going and to support them this year, to support them next year. And that, as I said, it's not loans, it's grants. We need proper financial supports.
And I totally agree, and I think it hasn't been really addressed is the elephant in the room, which is the fixed costs, which are accruing now. And let's say a holiday is great is one thing, but reality is they just need a total break from it in terms of rent, rates, insurance. Insurance, has just gone through the roof for any hospitality or tourism attraction. Again, there has to be a joined up thinking of how we deal with this. If businesses are closed for 3 to 4 to 5 months and they open up with this, even a fraction of it hanging over them.
Do you think we need an amnesty, Jack?
Yeah, I think it has to be. And it has to be, the rent is a massive thing. If you're in Dublin, the rent costs, if someone doesn't deal with that, well, these are they won't be financially viable to open up again. And again, no one is talking about that. And that's because it's still unclear when they can open. And but they have to. And in terms of rates is one thing. Yeah, okay. Look, if you're not getting the service, you shouldn't pay for it. The same thing, insurance. You shouldn't have to pay for insurance. If you've no customers, you've no liability. There has to be dealt with. And I think they will in some sort of way. But I think the rent side of things has to be tackled sooner rather than later. And for the government to find a way to find a compromise for a commercial landlord and the tenants that are actually there.
It sounds like a lot of painful conversations on the road ahead, but that's where we leave it. Thanks so much for being with us. And I really hope, as does, I would imagine, every single person who will be watching or listening to this, I really hope that the next time I speak to you both, that we are back to business as usual, that your pub is at capacity, Deirdre, and that there are people flooding into the visitor centre, among other things, Jack. And hopefully that's where things will be the next time I see you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Fingers crossed.
Thanks. Good to see you.
My next guest is a true pioneer of Irish craft beer. He founded his company in 1996 at the height of the Celtic Tiger, when international imports were in vogue, and opening an Irish brewery was seen as a big risk. It's Carlow Brewing boss Seamus O'Hara. Seamus, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm going to start with a really obvious question. We've just been speaking to Deirdre and Jack, prominent publican and distillery owner. And of course, you have the brewery, you also have a restaurant and a bar. So probably affected in 3 different ways due to COVID. How are things going in all of the businesses?
Yeah. So it is kind of different. So obviously, so we have a bar, brewery corner in Kilkenny. So that's closed at the moment, like all the bars. And in Dublin, we have Urban Brewing, which has a bar and restaurant, and it's substantially closed. We have a collect, click and collect and delivery sort of food and beer service from there running at the moment. But obviously the main part of the business is closed. And then down in Bagnallstown in Carlow, we have the brewery, and it's like, so our on-trade business, which between domestic and export is probably about half our business. So that's stopped for the moment, hopefully paused to recover. And then the off-trade side of the business, that's still functioning and pretty busy, to be honest. So we've, so at least I suppose looking on the bright side, part of the business is still operating and is allowing us to keep, I suppose, things going and keep a good chunk of the team together and so on. And, we're trying to kind of deal with that and respond to that.
And for the brewery, how have things changed? Are you doing home deliveries? Did you have to change the packaging? Actually, I'd also be interested to know, have consumer preferences in terms of favorite, like most popular kind of beer changed? Anything like that?
Yeah, so I suppose with like on the off-trade side of our business, the supermarkets and the independent off licenses, that kind of side has, initial bit of kind of panic buying and restocking challenges and so on. Once we got over that, that's been running pretty smoothly with the same product portfolio that we would have had. And it's pretty, we're seeing kind of strong upswing in that. Not enough to cover the loss of the on-trade, but nevertheless, and we've sort of shifted around our team, particularly the sales team, to focus more on that. And given that we don't know how long this will continue for, I suppose in some ways we're then trying to see, okay, what else can we do in the off-trade channel in terms of new products we might, bring to market, or we also do some import and distribution. So, and with that side of the business, which we kind of run under the umbrella of Radical Drinks, and there's a Radical Drinks website and, a web store. So we do online sales. We just launched online sales, about 2 weeks ago through that kind of platform. To particularly when there was a lot of uncertainty as to whether even the off-trade channel would stay open. So over a couple of days, we got our online store up and running with our kind of whole portfolio. That's radicaldrinks.com if anyone wants to check that out. So we've been kind of adopting, and in terms of the consumer preference, probably hard to tell. Like my kind of good feeling from just past experiences, people tend to be more experimental and try different things when they're buying an off-trade. So we're kind of optimistic that it's probably a good time for craft beer, that people, when they're browsing around the store and maybe sitting at home, might think about, whether it's trying something different and maybe looking for, something maybe more interesting in terms of flavor and so on. So, and we are, like I said, we're seeing kind of strong sales in the off-trade, and a bit of feedback we have as well is that maybe kind of slightly more established brands are getting better traction, and maybe people are looking for the safer options. So we're kind of hoping the O'Hara's brand is relatively established in Ireland in craft beer terms, and we're seeing some benefit from that as well.
And of course, you launched the company at a time when it wasn't such a great time to be an Irish brand or a local craft beer. 96, height of the Celtic Tiger, and I guess international imports were a bit more popular at the time. That must have been a brave move and quite a scary one back in 96. Yeah,
I suppose in 96 when we started, there wasn't even very many imports in the market. So like our idea to start a brewery came from, I suppose, living abroad for a little while in my case, and, seeing much bigger variety and diversity of beer in the market than we had in Ireland at that time. So I got kind of enthusiastic as a consumer probably, and then, trying to kind of set up a business, which, thought was an opportunity. But because there had been very little diversity in the market, if you think back then, there was like 3 or 4 beers in pretty much every pub, the same everywhere. And off trade was a much smaller percentage of the overall market. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire in the early days to sort of navigate that. And, export in the early days became an important part of our business, actually, because we saw that there was an appetite for a wider range of beers in lots of export markets, but less so in Ireland. But that kind of changed over time and, kind of gradually took off. And look, ups and downs along the way. We had obviously kind of heavy recession going back to the 2008, 2009 and onwards for a few years. And, we've seen ups and downs, I suppose, several times over the course, getting started in the first place, and then, different kind of challenges along the way. So this is kind of a big one currently, but I suppose in some ways, we've kind of learned a little bit over the years about trying to be resilient and deal with such challenges.
And I know that Michael O'Leary is someone you actually admire for that, for going global, for taking on international giants. Is that something you've aspired to do yourself from the start?
Yeah, at a different scale now, but like, look, you take inspiration by looking at other people, businesses, other business people, particularly Irish businesses that have managed to grow their businesses. I suppose particularly where maybe there's a big strong competitor, or kind of a monopoly or a duopoly kind of situation, as we would kind of say in our situation. There's obviously some very big brands, established brands in the market that have massive scale, and then like the craft beer sector and cider sector, actually, which we're part of, is very, very small in comparison, and there's no real in between. So in that kind of sense, it's almost a little bit unhealthy in that there's very small companies and then a few very large companies, and because probably like aviation, like alcohol sales is fairly heavily regulated. You can't just roll up to a farmer's market and sell your beer or sell out your front door. You have to go through established licensed channels. So again, when there's a small number of dominant players, that becomes quite a challenge, because that's heavily dominated by those brands. So like all the craft breweries, that's something we've had to kind of try to navigate. And like I said, if you get a little bit of inspiration from seeing other people, even if in other sectors, who've managed to kind of deal with that and prosper, despite the challenges. But you probably you have to find different ways, and maybe it makes you more creative and inventive. And I think that's partly what we and other craft breweries have tried to bring to the beer business generally in Ireland. I think craft beer has brought that, more innovation, more, in terms of product styles. There's a lot more diversity out there today. It's, maybe almost like kind of wine sector. You have a lot of different brands, a lot of different products, a lot of different varieties, which certainly, if you're a beer consumer, makes life more interesting.
You mentioned the 2008 recession there. As you rightly said, this wouldn't be the first time you've weathered quite a big storm and a challenge to the business. Would you have any tips or any wisdom to share from the last time you went through something like this? Yeah.
Like, I suppose, just to comment first on the last, funny enough, the last time when the recession came in, there was kind of a strong reaction from consumers in terms of supporting local and looking at, who's finding the local jobs, the local food, the local beverage, the local, businesses. So we actually, the business kind of grew quite well over that kind of recession period, and the craft beer kind of sector as a whole sort of developed quite strongly over that period, just because of that. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe some of that happens again this time. But I suppose in terms of meeting a challenge like this, like my kind of thinking on it is like a lot of it's about kind of keeping calm and trying to react quick. Like we lost roughly half our business overnight, so you can't panic. We have to kind of figure out, right, what do we do to keep the business stable, and look at our cost base and look at our cash flow and our cash, and try and adapt to that pretty quickly, and at least become stable and sustainable. And look, because we don't know how long the situation will continue, like our objective has been to really put the company on a sort of right size footing, like in terms of the cost base, with the kind of revenue as it is, that we can sustain as long as it takes. So that's kind of been our approach. But I suppose we came into it as well, like maybe because we've been through this before, and I feel we're a small company, in a very competitive sector. You never know what's around the corner. So like we've tried to be, I suppose, prepared in some ways by the diversity of our business. We, in terms of our product range, but also the customer bases we work with, on trade, off trade, domestic, export, and also with the shareholder base we have. Like we feel we have a strong backing there as well. And felt we were probably, like ready for things like this to come along, and hope that we're, kind of strong enough to navigate through it. And I think most importantly, as things could get up and running again, when maybe it's the toughest part, is that we have the resources to get going. And disruption always brings opportunity. So to be able to, I suppose, regrow the business and look at the opportunities that come our way, albeit in probably a different environment than we left a few weeks ago.
How do you prepare for something like this, Seamus, on an ongoing basis? So as you rightly mentioned, we don't know how long this is going to last, and even if it stops or pauses for a while, there's every chance it might all kick off again down the line if we don't get a vaccine soon enough. So is this a case that are you trying to prepare day by day, week by week, or is it a case of making a pretty detailed roadmap or a timeline of if things get back to, I suppose, normal, whatever that's going to look like? If they get back to normal next month, this is where we'll be, but if it's 6 months, we might have to close this, we might have to lay off that many. Where's your head at, I suppose I'm asking, or how do you juggle all this when you don't know what's going to happen?
Yeah, like it is kind of a tough one. And I suppose initially for us it was just to kind of manage the company like for today, in terms of what's there today, in terms of the business we have today, and so that we're, like I said, we're kind of sustainable as a business given the current environment, and then kind of working on the different scenarios, but probably given the uncertainty. And my own background is in biotech, so I kind of have some sense of the challenges of developing vaccines and things like that. That this is not going to change. This could be quite a long road. So that we, I suppose, try and work to a scenario where this could take a long while. And number one, that, like I said, we have a sort of sustainable business plan and financial plan to continue through that. And then looking in kind of more medium, longer term, given that the part of our business is still operating, how do we build that, and where are the opportunities there? What's in that space that we're not currently satisfying? Can we build our business in that way, and then have something in reserve for when other parts of the business, like the on-trade, the bars, the restaurants, kind of come back in whatever kind of step-by-step fashion. And there's no, I think, unfortunately, we don't have any crystal ball, but it's trying to work that. And look, we've been able to keep our team together by and large on the brewery side. Partly given that part of our business is still going, and with the benefit of some of the government supports have been brought in. So, like, the vast majority of our team are still working. Albeit maybe on 2, 3, or 4 days a week. So, like, that gives us the kind of platform then to keep developing the business, and in the downtime as well, trying to have a bit of resource there to look at, okay, what can we do in terms of new product development? What can we do in terms of improving the business, in terms of process or systems, and training and things like that? Haven't had, it's still only a few weeks, so it's still been pretty hectic dealing with everything, the more immediate things, but we definitely are trying to position ourselves then to see what, in terms of adopting, more looking at longer term, what things we can do to improve our business, and what new product opportunities may be out there that we can start to react to.
And on the other side of all this, it's going to be a strange new world for everybody, and no less for the craft beer market. Would you have any advice for people who might be, maybe planned to try and enter this market in late 2020, and now late 2020 is looking nothing like they thought it would? Joining a market like that on the other side of this, what do you think that will look like?
Yeah, I don't look hard to know. Look, I think, like, in our sector, there was already a little bit of consolidation maybe happening anyway. And if somebody asked me about joining the sector even 6 months ago, I would have said, well, tread carefully, because it's it's quite competitive, and there's quite a lot of companies in the space. And imports and so on. So, like, I probably would have been the same, be cautious anyway. So even now more so. But I do think, anytime there's disruption like this, to even go back to the 2008 period, like, particularly in a sector like ours where there's a big dominant kind of legacy business, disruption does create opportunities. So you have to be kind of, I suppose, alert to that as well. That's what we're trying to be, and probably there will be new opportunities for new entrants in some form or fashion. Like with the bar restaurant hat on, from that side of the business, like, the challenge there is there's the businesses are pretty much closed at the moment, and for that sector to get going again is going to be tough, and to accommodate social distancing and, have 100% of your overheads, but half or 30% of your business, that's hard to figure that out. But nevertheless, I think we have to try and be creative. And, right now, we don't have any guidelines on reopening those businesses, but once there are there, then that'll be, a challenge and an opportunity as well. And we're, I suppose, trying to put our thinking hats on and do some preparatory work for that side of the business, at the moment as well. So, but yeah, look, it's we'll see what the next few weeks bring.
An incredibly busy year ahead for you, I suppose, no matter what happens. But thank you so much, Seamus, for joining us this morning. And
you're welcome.
Best of luck, as I say to everybody on this show at the moment, best of luck with COVID over the next few weeks. And I'm sure we'll talk to you again on the other side.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for being with us. And thanks, of course, to AIB for backing the show. Before we go, don't forget to hit subscribe so that you get the full show each week on podcast and on YouTube, and so that you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. See you then.